Well, we're in my house in Los Angeles in Highland Park, the kind of east part of Los Angeles, not too far from downtown, which is, as you might or might not know, downtown is kind of a weird spot. Most cities, when you talk about downtown, you're talking about the kind of most intense area where the most people are, but in Los Angeles, it's like the reverse. The downtown area is kind of a ghost town because the city just kind of sprawls outward from there and has left this kind of hole. It's really mostly habitated by homeless people. It kind of speaks a lot to the kind of city this place is because it's kind of falling apart. Okay, the big book. Did you forget it?
No.
That would be classic. Oh man, it is massive. The book. You know what I love is these kind of binder. You never get to see these anymore. I remember being a kid, I just wanted to grow up and carry around a binder like this, you know? And then eventually I got one, of course, in school, and then you learn to really hate them. I'm gonna do a little reverse logic here and stuff from the back. I don't know if that's against the law. Why don't I talk about Yoko Ono? I mean, she's like such a polarizing figure. The brunt of the weight that she had to carry for this idea that she broke up the Beatles or whatever, it's really a heavy burden to carry. When John and Yoko met, he was still on the very peace man, everything positive kind of thing, and he felt like all conceptual art was kind of negative or something, but she was having a gallery show, I think in London, and there's one piece that she had where it was a ladder and you climb up the ladder and you look at the ceiling and then a really small type on the ceiling, it just said yes. And apparently, as the law goes, when he saw that, it really made him think differently about this kind of artwork. And so back to Yoko, I mean, she was a big part of Fluxus, that art movement, which is basically anti-art, which I love, you know, I'm always gonna be in for that. She's like the precursor to, you know, the interesting conceptual artists that I love, and particularly another artist that I'm a big fan of, Lawrence Weiner. Yeah, Lawrence Weiner is best known for putting text on the wall. An example of this right here is this. It says, "A rock smoothed to a stone by the continual caress of the bottom of the sea." What it does, you know, for a viewer, it creates this image of a rock becoming a smooth stone by the movement of the water. And he's really just telling you to imagine what that work would look like. I love that idea because it's about the viewer taking on use of their own imagination. The work is created in their mind. So the artist's role is not necessarily to create this object that people go into a gallery to marvel about. The role of the artist is to really instill an idea that is actually more important than the final object. So yeah, I've always been a big fan of his. For some reason, I latched onto Lawrence Weiner when I was pretty young, and I've had this book for quite a while, actually. I stole it from a library, unfortunately. And how we got to him was because Yoko was one of the pioneers of that kind of work, and I don't think she gets that kind of credit, you know. Here's one I can talk about. I'd like to anyway, because I'm a big fan of Baldassare. And of course, he's from California, so that ties in nicely, I suppose. Baldassare is a good example of someone who comes up with interesting ideas, and it's not necessarily about, you know, the final product. I mean, a good example, he did a California project where, you know, like on a map, it says in the big bold writing, it says California, you know, across it. And he took a map like that and then went to the actual spots where those letters would be physically and created the letters out of different materials and objects. And that's a cool idea. I know another work of his which is amazing. It's like the cremation project. He basically gathered all the paintings that he had done up until that point and burnt them. And he took the ashes and then he made a cookie recipe where he put all the ashes into that and made cookies. And so they kind of started fresh with this new piece. To me, the most interesting thing an artist can do is step out of the comfort zone that they've created with the work that was successful and to try something completely new and different. And some things he did after that were great too. Like, he kind of did these pointless exercises where he would set himself a kind of a challenge, you know, oh, can I throw 3 balls in the air and make a straight line? The cool thing was that he took photographs, but this was in a time period where it was just film, so he limited the amount of times that he would try this to 36 because that was the amount that's on a standard roll of film. He was working at a time where this kind of work took on a lot of criticism. Traditionalists was just saying that conceptual art was just like pointing. The artist is telling you like what to look at without really making anything, you know, which is fine, you know, I don't see a problem with that. But in a reaction to that, he did a series of works where he commissioned regular painters to just paint things that he told them to paint. And this was like messing with everyone's idea of what, you know, an artist is. Does it require you to have this kind of technical skill at, for example, painting or something, or is it just about having an idea? And like I said, you know, ooh, Nina Cherry. It draws a line to the way I think about music. I mean, I have an organ thing like this, you know. I can play it, you know, and I've made songs with this, but it's less about like, you know, playing these keys. What's fun is all these stupid buttons over here, like, and these crazy little drum machine. And you can mess with the timing of it and make it all weird. And then it does a kind of a manual chord thing, like, you know, it's doing that itself, you know. Anyway, my point is that reading music and playing it really well is one thing, but there's a whole other way of looking at it that appeals to me. I mean, it's like when I first heard sort of suicide or something, I realized, well, you know, you can be an artist and use this stuff and make something that conveys your idea without necessarily having to be trained in it. Dream, baby, dream. Dream, baby, dream. Dream, baby, dream. Dream, baby, dream. Forever. Suicide is the duo of Alan Vega and Martin Rev. They're both really interesting guys. They came out of New York in the 70s, 80s. Just made really beautiful songs, but crafted in a way that you could kind of tell it was like they were experimenting with the idea of making a song. Oh, baby, gotta keep that dream burning. It's more basic and simplified, but still really is visceral and is important to hear, you know? Just hearing them, I suppose, was a big thing for me, you know? I just was like, oh, maybe I don't need to like spend all day trying to figure out how to play something and just kind of try and play it, you know? Hey, gotta keep that flame burning forever, baby. In our case, the idea is really to be able to approach each record with that kind of childlike naivety that you lose if you become super adept at doing something. So, you know, if one of us is starting to actually get good at playing the guitar or the organ, then it's time to stop playing the guitar or the organ and pick up something completely new, so that then you have that weird approach to it that I think gives you like an interesting edge. And the recent records we've done have been with the computer. That again is just another entry into a world that I've no real sense of. I wonder where you go. I come true. I found it disorienting because suddenly at your fingertips you had like every sound in the world to play with. I was very paranoid about the idea of authenticity, you know, like, well, you know, I'm going to use this sound, which is in the program, and it's something that everyone uses. And so I started to wonder, well, who else has used this sound, and what is that going to reference, you know? I spent a lot of time calling up the head of the label. We're on Mute Records, and it's Daniel Miller, and he's like a pioneer of electronic music. He made the very famous early electro song called Warm Leatherette under his pseudonym, The Normal. And that's like a reference point, I think, for a lot of electronic musicians.
Warm Leatherette. Warm Leatherette. See the breaking glass in the underpass.
We always work with Daniel. I mean, he's the one that hears the record first, and he's the one that I'd ask, you know, whether or not he likes something. You know, there's no one else that I ask that of.
Warm Leatherette. Join the car crash set.
Martin Creed, I would like to talk about. He's another fun conceptual artist from England. I know one work he does that was a big video screen showing this video of a penis in its flaccid state and then slowly getting aroused and then slowly losing that erection. That sounds really fun to me. I know another work of his that he did, which was all just paintings he did with broccoli dipped into paint and pushed against paper, and those are actually really beautiful. I think what I like about it is this kind of relaxed way of approaching art that isn't caught up or hung up so much on any kind of principles about what good art is. He also, I know, numbers his pieces. I think he numbers them just because it's attaching a little bit less meaning to each work. It's got to do with his approach, which is very immediate and off the cuff. I mean, I know that he's said something like he wants to just do something and then sort of decide later whether he likes it or not. I think I know him because he is also a musician. But he approaches the music in a similar way to the artwork, where it's approaching it from an idea base. You know, he'll assign a guitar chord to a word and another guitar chord to another word, and maybe that'll be the whole song.
I was thinking, and then I wasn't thinking. And then I was thinking.
I think it's really interesting how you can apply a lot of these conceptual ideas to music. When we're making a record, usually we have a concept that's to do with an idea that we want to express. For example, Sister World was really focused on Los Angeles and what it's like to be a person here. The beauty really of LA is that it's not easily defined. The kind of classic way people see LA is this kind of Hollywood, plastic, rich people or whatever, but there's a very dark underside of the city as well. I was really interested in sort of the poverty and the homelessness, crime. And I wanted to put myself in the middle of that, and I moved to like a really kind of down and out part of the city. I got a TV and I watched terrible TV, and I covered my studio with newspaper articles of like horrible things going on in LA. And I just was trying to mainline the culture that was going on around me, in the sense that, like, you know, 2 guys were like shot right on my doorstep and like died. You should be careful, you should be careful, you should be careful, you should be careful. It's such a strange sensation, really, for that to happen. For the work that I was doing, it was so right, and you know, it's horrible to say, but I kind of felt like lucky because I got the chance to experience that, and on the same time you're just like devastated because it's just a horrible thing to happen. But I found it like endlessly fascinating. But with this record, it's like the loose sense of what is a concept, you know, because the concept really for this one was to work really quickly. It's a really refreshing way to work, to kind of just acknowledge what comes out of you and not question it too much. I wanted it to be a production that was really immediate and from the gut. Our first single off Mess, which is Mess on a Mission, is a very immediate song. As with all of the songs on this new record, it was something that happened really quickly. The lyric writing for Mess on a Mission is the idea of trying to put in perspective the difficulties that you might have as a person and using them in a kind of a cathartic way, putting a spin on it in a sense where now that you're aware of it, how can you make that work into your advantage? Facts are facts and fiction's fiction. Aaron and I write the songs together, basically, and when we're making a record, I'll write a bunch of stuff and then I'll send it to him. He'll mess with it and give it back, and so the process between him and I is very fluid. And the best part, I think, about what we do is that we're not a band where, as you can guess, one of us is the guitarist and one of us is the singer. There's periods where I've done guitar solos and Aaron's written lyrics. The cover is actually a photo of this thing right here. I could pick it up. It's a fan. Actually, Julian, who's the other member of the band, did this. It's photographed for the cover, and in the photograph, it is on, and it makes an awesome sound. The idea behind it really is to show the excitement and the fun and the vibrancy kind of the record. The other great thing about it is that it's got this quality to it that can be multiplied. And we've put string in pretty much every place we could think of around Los Angeles and photographed it. We do a lot of our own press photos. You know, I was talking about the series of works that Baldassare did about you know, throwing balls in the air and trying to create a line. Well, we copied that whole idea for a photo shoot we did recently. We toyed with the idea of using like Photoshop to really get them all in one line, but then I didn't like that so much. So yeah, I'd already come across this page because Simon Starling, I think, is a really interesting artist. I know that he won the Turner Art Prize, and I think it was for this piece, which I loved the idea of. He took a wooden shed, he takes the shed apart, and then he builds a boat with the shed. He sails the boat down the river, and he takes the boat out of the water, takes the boat apart and puts the shed back together. It's a really beautiful idea, you know, the transformative quality of art. The wood is going to take on this whole new kind of look and feel after it's been in the water that long. And then, you know, you go and put it back together and it's going to have that quality to it. I know he did another boat piece, which I think is really fun. He got like a wooden boat with a steam engine, and he got on this boat with another guy. The whole time the boat's on the water steaming along, the other guy is basically chopping up the wood that the boat's made out of and feeding it to the steam engine that he's sailing it with. And so, you know, eventually the boat is no longer being a boat and it's sinking. And the last shots really are just of him and this guy in the water with their life preservers, you know. I think that's why I like him, is it's like a fun and interesting way of thinking about art. I've come across another thing which is worth talking about here, The Knife. It's a band, I think they're Swedish, that make mostly electronic music. They put a record out recently called Shaking the Habitual. And it's a great record, but they started to do shows with it, and it's been a pretty controversial show. Is really pushing the traditional ideas of what a band is supposed to do on stage. You know, that being that they're supposed to stand there and play their instruments, and what The Knife have been doing is pretty much everything but that. Sometimes they're just miming, sometimes they're just dancing to it, sometimes they're not even on stage at all. What The Knife have done is really bring up the conversation about what is a performance if you're an electronic musician. You're making a lot of music with your computer, with your keyboard and your mouse. And so what does it mean then to go and try and perform that?
It's a raging love in a difference. Ooh, a difference. A little difference would make.
Seeing the knife play at festivals, and some people are really upset. Some other people are really inspired and excited by it. Look, that in of itself is a good result of any artwork, I think. I think that's always what you should be aiming for when you make something, is really to create a discussion that's going to go on, you know, so.
Facts are facts and fiction's fiction.